Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Iowa Down Ballot podcast, our weekly confab of all things politics in Iowa and some other things that impact Iowa politics, the people, the places, the issues, the events, this big campaign, all that kind of stuff. We talk about it here on the podcast. I'm Dave Price, joined by my Iowa Writers Collaborative collaborators. Kathie Obradovich, the czar, the queen of the Iowa Capitol Dispatch, and Laura Belin, the founder, the creator, the editor, the writer, the bookkeeper. Did I get them all? A bleeding heart.
Most of them, yes.
Most of them, yes. It just depends on the week. How are you both? And I love your peach, Kathie.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, happy Friday. It doesn't feel like Friday because I think we're going to be going all weekend, right? At least with the Saturday State Fair. So,
Indeed. I feel like I need to pre-apologize just in case for how this podcast goes. We were recording on Friday morning. Laura went to the Wing Ding, which we're going to talk about at Clear Lake. That ain't close to Des Moines. I went to Dyersville for the Field of Dreams game with my son. That is not close to Des Moines. So not to whine, but we both had very short nights and took a good extended nap separately. Do you drink caffeine, Laura? I've never asked you that.
I do not. I get all the caffeine I need from chocolate. So.
Okay.
But I got home at about 11:30 last night, and then I was just wired. So I couldn't go to sleep right away because it was a highly stimulating environment up there at the historic surf ballroom in Clear Lake.
Oh, man, I'm jealous. You beat us by an hour and a half. We walked in just a couple of minutes before 1. And my 16-year-old, he's like the Energizer Bunny. He slept almost the entire 3-hour drive back. Now, he did drive us there so that I could work while we drove, but I guess 10:30 was his knockout point. So it was just me in a silent car for 3 hours on Highway 20. But here we are. All right. How about we lead off with
I didn't do anything. Plus,
you're bragging.
You edited a bunch of stories.
I did. I stayed home. I watched the Field of Dreams on Netflix,
Oh,
not
nice.
to give them any kind of, plug or anything. And yeah, I did edit the Wingding story when it came in. And I, drank some wine. And so today I have my baseball mug for my caffeine. So
may I just say that it's good to be the boss working at home when you can drink. I'm not going to allege that you drank your wine while you edited Robin's story from the Wingding. That's for everyone else to figure out. And this is not a confessional here, but regardless of the order, that's the way to make that night work.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't been doing this for almost 40 years for nothing, Dave.
Amen. All right, Laura, since you were the one of the three of us physically present at the Wingding, give us a little intro, because you've gone to a bunch of these things. Talk about what happens at this first, and then obviously, as they usually do, they have a high-profile guest, in this case, who is Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. But talk about, you get in there at the surf ballroom, what's the atmosphere like typically?
The Iowa Democratic Wingding is a fundraiser that's put on by a bunch of county Democratic Party organizations all across northern and western Iowa, but they draw a lot of people even from outside that very large region. So I saw people from Scott County and Polk County and lots of places, but they said last night that there were about 750 people there. That certainly the room was very, very full. They said it was the best attended Wingding since 2019 when they had more than a dozen presidential candidates there. I was at that Wingding as well. And that was kind of wild with the presidential candidate sign wars. Since it's after the primary, so there is no Democratic competition, they had most of the statewide candidates speaking, except not Rob Sand or Dave Muhlbauer, but they had all the other nominees for statewide offices. Chris Jones, Taylor Weddick, John Norwood, the Nate Willems, and Ryan Peterman running for Secretary of State. And then they always have two congressional candidates from two districts. So they had Lindsey James, the nominee in the 2nd district, and Dave Dawson in the 4th. And as you mentioned, Mark Kelly, the keynote speaker, who really gave kind of a rally the troops speech. Last year, their keynote was Harry Dunn, who was the Capitol Police officer who was there on January 6th, and he gave more of an introspective speech than Senator Kelly. He said kind of what you would expect someone to say when they would. Oh, I forgot to mention Josh Turek, the Senate candidate, was there too, speaking. And all of the crowd was very into the speeches. Afterwards, when I was talking to activists, there's a lot going on the ground. There are coordinated campaign offices open in several of these counties across the second and fourth districts. And so people seem pretty fired up.
The one thing that I thought was interesting from what Kelly was talking about, this is where I feel like Democrats are split a little bit on when they're talking about on the DC level. Kelly was talking about the importance of Democrats getting back into the majority so they could investigate the alleged corruption of the Trump administration. As you know, some Democrats don't really want to talk about that stuff, and they may not want to talk about Trump at all, or they don't want to talk about, possible impeachment again and corruption and all that kind of stuff. What was your take about how that played with the crowd?
Well, and he didn't talk about impeachment, but I think if you're Mark Kelly and we were threatened with prosecution for that video that he and other members of Congress recorded that said to service members, you don't have to follow illegal orders. I think you almost can't avoid talking about the Trump administration a little bit, but I definitely didn't feel like that was the focus of his remarks. He was really trying to say we've got to get things under control. And he has this story that I've seen him tell before in other venues when I've watched him, but about going with his daughter, who's about 30 years old now, to visit the house where he and his wife lived when she was born. And it was a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood that he could afford to buy as a young Navy officer, which nobody in his daughter's generation can afford to buy a house like that in a neighborhood like that at her age. So he did, I would say he emphasized the economic issues more, but he talked about the investigating and what Pete Hegseth is doing. And I saw later after his speech, he did a segment on MS Now, and he was talking more about some of these allegations about what's happening on the Abraham Lincoln in the Gulf. And he didn't dwell on that during his speech, but people were, I mean, I think that at a crowd like that, people do want to hear that content about investigating the Trump administration, but that's definitely not something like I don't think I've ever heard Josh Turek say, like, send me to the Senate so that I can investigate Trump corruption.
Yeah, Dave, you said exactly what I was thinking, that it was an interesting choice, given that I think that there is a definite thought among at least some of the party that you don't want to focus on Trump.
Hmm.
And I also agree with Laura, though, that I think from Mark Kelly, because of the fact that he's been investigated, that this is, people would think it was weird if he didn't mention it. So you got kind of two things there, and it may not have been the focus of his speech, but it certainly I think was probably the focus of a lot of the media, writing about his speech. The second thing I just want to point out is he has not only not ruled out running for president, he's
Hmm.
actually said that he's, thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
so to have him in Iowa as a headliner of the Wingding, it takes on added significance as we always looking ahead to the next presidential race, even though we're not over the hump of the midterms yet. These kinds of events are kind of the unofficial start to the 2028 cycle. So I really, one of my colleagues in Arizona said, well, do you think Mark Kelly's going to run? I said, well, he's making the moves.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah, well,
doing the thing.
I'm
So,
sure that he was booked before the DNC did the calendar decision that left Iowa out of the early wing. He probably committed to the wingding before that, but he did do the obligatory I have an Iowa connection because it turns out that he said his wife's brother was a Cyclone and was a kicker for the football team, and in fact held the record for the longest field goal for 45 years. He said that record was just broken, I think he said last year. So
okay,
you
that
got
is a
to
good
hear
Iowa.
about the Iowa connection.
That is a good Iowa connection. You're coming from a Cyclone and a Ames native. So,
The search for any potential presidential candidate finding some kind of real or almost obscure Iowa connection is kind of like what I think many people are trying to do now with Quincy, Illinois, where they sold that $1 billion plus Powerball ticket. You're like, man, I need to have like a great aunt who lives there. Like, I need to go through our family lineage and all my friends because somebody in Quincy, I hope I'm related to them to get a check. I did no wingding, but earlier this week I went to Newton where the RNC chair was there, the state party chair, Jeff Kaufman for Republican Party of Iowa, Marinette Miller Meeks was there, a few Derek Wolf, the lieutenant governor candidate, was there, a few local state house candidates were there, and it was kind of sort of a coordinated effort. I need to interrupt myself for a second because the Scott Bessent visit was odd to me. The Treasury Secretary, he did a couple of things, one event with Miller Meeks, one with Congressman Zach Nunn, but it was limited media, and apparently they did a few outlets did some preview stories, and then they were able to cover it. I don't really know how this all went down. I was trying to play catch up. It is rather embarrassing to not know that the Treasury Secretary is coming, and so I didn't know until I think the evening before or something like that. Generally, you get a heads up for that. I don't know what you both thought of this, but and I appreciate Laura. The Trump administration's probably not dialing you up.
Welcome to my world, Dave. I was going to say I
stuff.
absolutely didn't know. I also didn't know about the event in Newton, so otherwise I would have wanted to be there.
But I work for 9 television stations that broadcast in Iowa, so I assumed that we would be part of that. But so it was limited coverage, and so they kind of build some things as exclusives the way they did it. But I mean, this is semantics, I suppose, but as we have seen, sometimes you see a White House use a cabinet official technically for an official visit, but let's be honest, it's campaign season and you're here for 2 competitive seats. But I don't know, I don't want to get us on a side tangent too far here, but I just found it odd. And I just had 6 hours in the car going to Dyersville and back, so I was kind of ruminating on some of these things. But I was thinking, I can't remember a time where it's like a cabinet official here, and you're not really able to cover it as a traditional member of the media or whatever. Kathie, can you go through your mental Rolodex here? Did you find that unusual?
Yeah, there have been times, and yeah, we didn't get a notice of that either.
Okay.
So it's not just Laura, and Laura, you're not alone on this one. But yeah, I think it's unusual. I kind of didn't why not get the most bang for the buck if you're gonna fly somebody out here, and yeah, it was a busy day. Who knows if we would have had time to cover it or not. I think that, there have been occasions with the Trump administration where they have restricted media, and if Trump himself, I mean, like,
Yeah.
he's gone to the West Side Conservative Club in Urbandale, and you can sort of understand you may not be able to pack as much media into the Iowa Machine Shed restaurant as you might want to have. But yeah, I mean, I think that there have been times, but it's during campaign season when you're really trying to promote a candidate, it just seems like an odd choice. So
anyway, and I essentially interrupted my own story, but that was on the back. That was on my mind. So that event in Newton. The speech by the RNC chair was interesting to me, and I thought, honestly, I thought very effective. So Jeff Kaufman, and as an aside, they didn't talk very much about Trump at all, which I thought was interesting. But Jeff Kaufman was kind of giving his traditional speech, and he was portraying the Democrats as crazies and nuts and those kind of things. And, and he gives these very fired up speeches. The RNC chair, that's not his style. I think he's from Florida. That's not his style. What I thought was effective, and Jeff's speech was all about unity. So, hey, the election's over, the primary's over, let's all get together, let's do this, whatever. And it went over with the crowd. There were several dozen people there. The RNC chair, he was doing math. And he was talking about, look, in the House, you have 435 members, and there are like 18-ish truly competitive seats. And when you start doing the math and you look at Cook Political Report doing their forecasting, he was making the sales pitch to these folks that, look, we really just need about 6 of these, 6 of the 18 or so. And I think I have my math right here. If I get one more cup of coffee down, I'll make sure my brain cylinders are firing here. But standing there in the back of the room watching it, I thought that seems like a pretty effective way to communicate to the crowd, like essentially saying, hey, it's kind of a tough environment. And he acknowledged, midterms don't usually go well for the party in power. And then he mentioned, of course, that, hey, we have 2 competitive seats here. I think he said 2. I don't think he said 3. I don't think he counted Hinson's congressional seat. But anyway, I don't know if you've heard any other prominent Republican kind of make that pitch. Marianne Miller Meeks, she's not like a screamer, a rah-rah. She largely did her biographical speech. She kind of mixed in patriotism with it. I mean, it was kind of emotional a couple of times. I've heard a bunch of different variations of this speech, but she did joke she was hopped up on Diet Coke before this because she walked in with this huge thing of Diet Coke, which she confessed was not the first one she had for the day. But her speech was very effective with this group too. But to go back to what the RNC chair was talking about, I'm curious if you both have heard any other prominent Republican kind of use this sales pitch about, here's what the atmosphere is like. Here's what we need to focus on, and let's do that.
It seems a little bit like a perverse message in the sense of, okay, we really only need to focus on 6 of 18 of these seats. To me, not having heard it is like, well, relax, people. We're really, in great shape, and we only have to get less than half of these seats.
Give me one sec to interrupt, and I'm sorry to do this. And I should have underscored that when he made that pitch, he immediately talked about, hey, 2 of the 6 are right here. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I feel like I've left out part of the context without saying that. So he's saying, hey, 2 of the 6 here are right in this state, and this is the most important state. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, okay. Well, that helps. But yeah, I mean, I think um, I think that there are probably folks that kind of thing appeals to,
Mm-hmm.
and presumably they're talking to party insiders
For
here.
sure.
I'd be interested to know if he goes to, some other state and says, and 2 of the 16s are right here,
Uh,
you know. But yeah, it is a different way of talking about the race for sure.
I think 18 is very low. I think that if it turns out being a wave election, even with all the gerrymandering that's happened, that's reduced the number of competitive districts, I think there are a lot more than 18 seats that are truly in play. And while you were talking, Dave, I just went back to look to double check my memory of this. The National Republican Congressional Committee, which is the main campaign arm of U.S. House Republicans, they added Iowa's second district to their target list in March.
mm-hmm.
They put Joe Mitchell on what they call their MAGA majority program or
Yeah.
whatever. So they officially acknowledge that Iowa has 3 competitive districts. And Joe Mitchell, when he was last month at that family leadership summit, he made some comment along the lines of, Ashley Hinson's been great, but the only problem is that she made a lot of people think that this district isn't really competitive, but it is, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would say there are definitely 3 competitive districts in Iowa, and I'm not sure that I definitely wouldn't go along with only 18 across the country being competitive.
We also saw, since we just mentioned Nunn, he was touting that he is one of the most bipartisan members in the United States House. And it reminded me back when he was running in that primary campaign the first time. I talked to Republican insider type, I guess you'd probably call this person who's been around Iowa politics on the Republican side for a long time. And as we all well know, I had that debate moment with Nunn when we had our debate when he was running in that congressional primary. And I had sort of spur of the moment had asked them about who wants to ban all abortions, basically. And Nunn kind of looked around at the other candidates and eventually raised his hand, and that became a campaign commercial that probably still runs today that I wish would go away. My kids joked about it, and it's about a very serious topic. But I remember at the time a Republican strategist had told me, hey, look, Nunn is doing what he's got to do to get through this primary, but he is going to pivot. He understands the district very well. He knows it's a purple district. It's going to stay a purple district, and he's really going to push bipartisanship. Now, I'm not saying he's not a Republican. Of course he is, and he'll do videos that, where he will talk about his support of President Trump and all that kind of stuff. But it can't hurt to have a list come out to list you as the third most bipartisan member of the United States House in a very competitive seat in a very competitive year.
Ooh, I mean, I wonder what their criteria were
I should have looked that up.
for bipartisanship, because I mean, whenever I look at voting records, it seems to me like the Iowa Republican delegation votes with the majority, way, I would say probably more than 90% of the time. It's got to be something other than voting record.
What they
I think
sponsor.
part of it is co-sponsoring
Yes.
bills. And
Yes.
so I think he co-sponsors a bunch of
lot.
bipartisan bills that don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then he gets credit for being a bipartisan member of Congress. So that I would guess, but I don't know the specific criteria, but on lists like that before I've seen that. And speaking of, as you mentioned earlier, Dave, the cabinet official coming here for an ostensibly official event that's really connected to the campaign. Zach Nunn has been doing a lot of ribbon cutting ceremonies for earmarks that were actually finalized sometimes in January or in March, but the ribbon cuttings are happening now, and those are all official events, not campaign events, but he's getting a ton of media coverage from those events, and that can only be helpful to his campaign.
Yeah, and he's definitely taking advantage of the recess, the vacation, whatever term you want to use, as Congress is not meeting. Yeah, he has been doing a lot of these. I was going to tally those up for a story that I haven't done yet, but there have been, it feels like 2 or 3 of them a week here the last couple of weeks. He's had quite a few of them. Okay, so related to his campaign, I feel like, how many weeks in a row have we talked about the libertarians? But seriously, like every show, we've had some new development, right? And we do yet again. We need like a music open of like some old soap opera kind of theme-ish music as the libertarian turns or something. But
who would have thought that being kicked off the ballot would be like the most free media that the Libertarian Party gets? But yeah, I mean, basically, those who have not been following this saga, 2 of the Libertarian tickets got kicked off the ballot by the state objection panel. One was the Lieutenant Governor candidate, Jules Cutler, which then put the whole ticket in jeopardy. And second was the 3rd district candidate, Marco Battaglia, who got kicked off because his actual legal name is Mark Anderson. Who knew? And so so the party has been fighting this in court. Marco Battaglia announced that he had a medical emergency and dropped out of the race. And so the Libertarians had a convention. They nominated a previous, this is a name that should be well known to libertarians and folks following politics, Charles Aldrich, as the lieutenant governor candidate. He has run in most recently ran in the 4th district, congressional district. And then Jacob Hurd, who actually was serving as a libertarian's lawyer and has run for the state house, he is going to run in the 3rd congressional district. So they've got candidates, part of the reason that we follow this so closely is that because we have a lot of competitive races, any third party candidate, including the libertarians, can actually make a mark on these races. So,
and Charles Aldrich was one of the libertarians. So both of the candidates on their governor ticket, Nicholas Gluba and Charles Aldrich, now the lieutenant governor, replacement candidate. They both attempted to run for Congress in 2024, and they were part of that case that went up to the Iowa Supreme Court, and the Iowa Supreme Court disqualified or upheld the decision disqualifying the Libertarian candidates from the ballot on the grounds that the party hadn't done the convention process to nominate them the right way. And I learned at that time, I didn't realize that Charles Aldrich used to live in Minnesota, and he ran for Senate, U.S. Senate as a Libertarian in Minnesota in that 2008 election that went to that months-long recount and contest between Al Franken and Norm Coleman. So he got almost 14,000 votes in that election, where the final result between Al Franken and Norm Coleman was like 200 and something.
I mean, seriously, what other podcast are you going to listen to where you're going to get that kind of nugget? Seriously. Bring
it. Seems like the libertarians could really be a force in Iowa if they would just learn the rules. You can stop making themselves vulnerable to being kicked off the ballot.
And I didn't even know about this process that you could replace a candidate. I'm sure that the Republicans are going to file some kind of legal challenge, like how can you replace a candidate who didn't actually qualify for the ballot in the first place. So we'll probably end up getting a court case anyway. But I wasn't aware of this avenue. I thought that if you didn't do it through a petition, that you would have to go through and have a special convention. And that's very difficult now for third parties. They've upped the requirements of how many people need to be at a convention to nominate someone.
Hey, Kathie, let's put a little addition, a little cherry on top of what we were talking about earlier. We talked about Mark Calling looking at the presidential race, and I think, Laura, you already talked about the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. But we're recording on Friday morning. Saturday, we could kind of finalize this decision, it sounds like, to kind of know what the calendar will look like.
Yeah, the full DNC is meeting on Saturday, and it would be expected to ratify the calendar that the Rules and Bylaws Committee already proposed. So Iowa was left out of that. It's five early states, starting with South Carolina, also including Nevada. New Hampshire is third in the lineup, if I'm remembering correctly. Michigan and Virginia. And when the Rules and Bylaws Committee made their decision, the Iowa Republican leadership was a little bit I would say coy about whether the party, they'll propose that the party actually follow the rules as the DNC lays them out and goes after Super Tuesday, or if they'll jump the line and have, like a rogue early caucus. There's two schools of thought about that in the party. Even people who like the caucuses maybe don't want the state to try to defy the DNC. Some people really are sick of the caucuses and say, we should let them go. But it really rubbed Iowa Republicans or Iowa Democrats, the wrong way when New Hampshire was left out of the early cycle in 2024, went early anyway, and suffered no consequences for it. Iowa, on the other hand, followed the rules, got stripped of their Rules and Bylaws Committee member, and are now left out in the cold again. So there's some who feel like they really didn't, they're sort of punished for following the rules, and that New Hampshire was rewarded for essentially flouting the rules in 2024. So I think it'll be interesting to see. They said that party leadership said that they wouldn't probably make any kind of decision about it until after the midterms. But we'll see. I mean, if Iowa elects more Democrats in the midterms, the party may feel like they have a little bit more leverage to test the DNC on whatever rules they have, stripping delegates, all of that, which oftentimes goes away by the time a presidential candidate is nominated.
Hey, Laura and I are going to sprint out of here as soon as we finish recording to go over to the Des Moines Register soapbox it'll be day 2 of the fair, but day 1 of candidates actually going to the soapbox. As we close out this week, and so today's Friday, as we record this. Friday will be the first day that candidates will be there. There are like 5 or so today. There are a bunch on Saturday, none on Sunday, then back a bunch on Monday. Then we carry out through the week. Laura, without getting too specific about individual candidates, what do you watch? What are you going to be watching? We're going to have Democrats and some Republicans will be part of this, but like as you're standing there listening to these speeches, and so we'll see a candidate kind of on a stage, and there'll be some folks gathered around them, probably some supporters, but maybe some hecklers too. But what are you going to be watching overall?
I'm always curious to see whether they hang around to take questions afterwards. But mainly, I want to know whether they come to the soapbox with a focus message on some issue or set of issues, or whether they just give their same introductory biographical speech that I've probably seen them give before.
All right, Kathie, as you assemble your team to get ready to cover all this, and you know how the sausage has been made because you're a part of the Register for a long time for this tradition. How do you guide your team, and what are they going to be watching for?
Yeah, I mean, we try to, keep we're obviously looking for candidates to make news. So similar to what
Sure.
Laura said, if it's just a biographical speech that we've heard before, they're not gonna really be making much news. We like to see, them come with a specific issue, something to talk about, something that is provocative, maybe, and also, looking at the crowd reaction. So, do they have supporters there? Are they relying on just whoever might be walking by, which is sort of the ethic of the soapbox in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
That's the tradition and the history. But organized campaigns are going to seed the crowd with their supporters and have people there early, taking the chairs in the front. So sort of looking at that evidence of some campaign organization. So and soapbox is always fun. It's unpredictable. You never know. And I always love watching candidates at the fair. You can really tell who's comfortable talking to people that they
Yes.
don't know. I have a lot of stories about presidential candidates at the fair. We can talk about that some other time.
I know
But
we should seriously do an entire episode on that for
yeah,
sure.
I mean,
That'd be fun.
I want to know what they eat,
Yep.
et cetera. So whether they flip pork chops and drop one on the ground and put it back on the
Put it back
grill
on the
is
grill.
one.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Five
yeah.
All
second
right.
rule.
Yeah.
Kathie and Laura, thank you both. Have a good weekend. Let's hope the rain stays away. Friday morning brought another round of rain, as did Thursday. So we'll see how that shakes out and whether the heat will give us a break next week as we're standing out there listening to these folks. Thank you to all of you who've dropped in for the podcast this week. Thanks to the new subscribers. Thanks to those of you who've been sharing this to help us grow each week. And a special thanks to those of you who have been paid subscribers of this podcast in the past and have kind of re-upped and enhanced your support level. We very much appreciate that. And those of you who might be thinking about supporting the podcast, we very much appreciate that. We're going to do something special in the weeks ahead for those of you who are paid subscribers. We'll talk a little bit more about that the next couple of weeks. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.